Okay, good morning. I'm Aaron Chatterley. I am the founder of an e-commerce business called Feel Unique. So I hope everyone's heard of it. Living in Jersey, I'd be surprised if you haven't. If you haven't, then we really haven't done our job very well. Yeah, everyone kind of knows who we are and what we do. So I founded Feel Unique. I currently run a small investment fund out of Jersey. We invest in tech businesses, early stage tech businesses, primarily in the UK, but we've done a couple in Jersey now. I also am about to get heavily involved in a new business, which I can't tell you too much about, but it's slightly controversial. So what I was going to do, I'm slightly jet lagged. I've just got back from Los Angeles, so if I'm a bit groggy and not quite compos mentis, I apologise, hence also the slides. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a bit more about Feel Unique, because I think it's quite important to understand the background of what we did and how the business evolved in the context of export. I think it's quite important that to kind of get a sense of what's got the business to where it is, because a lot of those steps that we took along the way are very, very important in terms of the kind of export proposition that Feel Unique found itself in. Okay, and then I'll talk a little bit about the changes that we had to make to the business, the way that we ended up exporting, the way we capitalized on some of that opportunity, and then, if it's okay, I'll take any questions you like on any subject, including export or whatever it is. If we keep the questions until I've finished speaking, that's probably better. Otherwise, I'll get distracted and all over the place, and it'll be really, really incoherent. So, have a seat. So everyone kind of knows who Feel Unique is, which is good. So I launched Feel Unique with another Jersey guy, 1995. Prior to that, I was in tech, I guess. In the early stages of the internet, I worked for. If everyone's heard this story before, put your hands up, and I'll jump forward. No, good. So prior to that, I worked in tech. I used to work for a business called Cable and Wireless, who are now the owners of Shaw over here, but in the 80s and 90s, they were a fairly substantial organization. At the time, it employed about 80,000 people worldwide. My role at Cable and Wireless was I worked in data marketing, which in the late 80s and early 90s was kind of precursor to what is now the internet. I spent a year in the West Indies in 1995 in Tortola, in the British Virgin Islands, setting up an internet service provider. And then when I came back from that, I kind of recognized that this was the very, very early stage of pioneering days of the internet, if you like, that there was an opportunity to develop a web development company, a web design company. Because when I got back, my role at Cable and Wireless, when I returned, was literally an internet evangelist. And that was talking to Cable and Wireless's bigger customers about what the internet was, how it worked, what it could do for their businesses. But what we found was that we get all these great big organizations super excited about the internet, but there was nowhere that they could go, or very few places that they could go to have websites built, to understand the technology. So I kind of spotted an opportunity there. I was living in Oxford at the time, launched a web development company, brought in some experts in design and tech and business process management, and set up a small web design agency. We sold that just under 3 years later in 2000, June of 2000. And for anybody that knows their internet history, the internet bubble burst in July 2000. So it was very, very good timing. And then a couple of years later, after doing various consultancy things, I moved back to Jersey. And a couple of very good friends of mine had a business called Play.com, which hopefully you have all heard of. And they were literally shooting the lights out in kind of 2004, 2005. I had come to the end of my kind of exclusion from doing anything in e-commerce, having sold my previous business. And got chatting to co-founder of Feel Unique, a guy called Richard Sheasel, who's a good friend of mine, about setting up something else. But I didn't want to do something agency side. Having seen the pots of money that the guys at Play were making at that point in time, we decided to set up an e-commerce business. Richard was doing something else in kind of finance and admin, had very different skill sets to me, and we decided to set up a retail business. At the time, Jersey obviously had a tax advantage with LVCR. Everyone know what LVCR was? Yeah, low value consignment relief. So it was kind of an opportunistic play, but we were Jersey based. So we looked at lots and lots of different markets. What we wanted to do was we wanted to find a vertical market that had the ability to, or we wanted to find a space in a vertical market that wasn't currently occupied in the way that Amazon owned books and ASOS and Net-a-Porter owned fashion at different degrees, and Play.com at the time owned DVDs. We wanted to find a whole vertical because we didn't just want to create a little lifestyle business that would pay the school fees and pay the mortgage fees. We wanted to create a monster. So we looked at lots of different things. We looked at music downloads, we looked at digital cameras, we looked at lingerie at one point. We knew a little bit more about lingerie than we did about beauty, in fairness. We looked at all sorts of things, and there were various barriers to entry that we kind of came upon. And eventually we kind of hit upon the idea of selling beauty. The great thing about beauty products online at the time were twofold. The first was that nobody owned that market, that vertical online at the time. There were a few players, and none of them were doing it particularly well. So there was an opportunity, if we could nail that, to create the next ASOS of beauty, if you like, online. The other great thing about beauty, in terms of customer acquisition and marketing and growth, was that everything that we sell, or putting aside things like hair dryers and the electronics, everything that we sell will run out, and you will have to come back and buy more. And online, it's a very expensive proposition to get customers. If any of you, does anybody sell online at the moment? Right? Yes, one. Anyway, it's not as simple as it sounds, trust me. So cost per acquisition is actually very high online. So from our perspective, everything that we sell is going to run out. And if we do a good job, you're going to come back and you're going to buy more, hopefully. And the reality is actually that I feel unique. Given the average basket size that we have and the margins are very tight on beauty, we need customers to come back 3.5 times before they'll pay for themselves. So the cost per acquisition for us is actually very high. Now, bearing in mind that 40% of those customers will never come back for whatever reason, because they might just be buying a one-off purchase, it might be a gift, it might be a whole bunch of reasons. Our average across all of our customers has to be 3.5 times for you to return for us to pay for the cost of acquisition. So it's quite a tight model. So the reason that we set up beauty was because nobody owned the market and we were crazily ambitious and focused, and B, it seemed at the time like, well, if we sell you a moisturizer, you're going to need more. You're going to need more deodorant, more shampoo, all that stuff. It's a replenishment thing. So we did a lot of market research, and we were very lucky that we were incredibly stupid and naive, because it was myself and Richard who, beyond having, actually I was going to say wives and girlfriends, but I didn't at the time. I was single. Richard had a wife. That was our only exposure to the beauty world, and we were very lucky that we didn't know anything about beauty at the time, as crazy as that sounds, because if we did know what we would have to do to get the brands and to build the website, we never would have done it. We sat down in his kitchen in April 2004 with this brilliant idea of selling beauty products online. We did all the models, we did all the forecasting, and we were pretty confident we could make money. We knew we'd lose money for about 18 months, and then we should go into the black. But what we didn't have was we didn't have somebody there who knew anything about beauty. Now, I wouldn't suggest that this is the way that everyone should go out and start a business. I would suggest that you do a bit more market research than we did, but we ended up being very lucky. Because we didn't have that third person in the room who knew about beauty, we just assumed if we build a website and we make it look really good, which we knew a lot about. We knew about web design because I'd run a design agency before. We knew about customer acquisition, we knew about online marketing, we knew how to run a business. We're pretty competent all around, but we just missing that beauty piece. So we just assumed, well, if we build a great website, the next thing we did was we pick up the phone to all of the big beauty brands and say, send us an order form. That's pretty much what we did. We spent a chunk of money, we built this great website, and then we got some offices in Halkett Place, picked up the phone to all the beauty retailers like Chanel and Lancome and Yves Saint Laurent and said, hey guys, great news, we've built this great website. Can you send us an order form so we can sell your products? And they all kind of went, no, no way, are you crazy? Because that's not how luxury works, and that's certainly not how beauty works. So we kind of found ourselves with this great website and no products, which is a bit of a problem. And we spent a lot of money on this thing. We managed to get a couple of minor brands, and bear in mind we were after brands like Chanel and Lancome and Tom Ford and Estee Lauder and Clinique. These are the brands that our customers wanted. But we managed to get one or two small brands like L'Oreal Paris, the kind of things that you find in Waitrose, to be honest, Nivea, various niche-y little brands. We had a bunch of crap, really. And we started to trickle out a few sales, and it was all very, very worrying. And we thought, we really need to find some proper products here, and the brands aren't going to supply us. So several days on Google, we hit upon what's called the grey market. The grey market is alternative supply. It's basically the big manufacturers will overcommit on orders. They will pressurize local distributors around Europe to order very, very heavily, and all of this product ends up on the shelves. These people have got no way of getting rid of it, so it all goes onto what they call the grey market. That's the problem. It's the brand's own fault because they overcommit. Anyway, this stuff ends up on a kind of alternative marketplace. Now, we found a couple of wholesalers in the UK that would go around Europe and buy all this stuff. So what we did in the very, very early days was, this is really not export, but it will come to it, I promise you. What we did was we found these two wholesalers of beauty products, one in Cardiff and one in Birmingham. And at the time, there was myself and Richard in an office about as big as this, half of which was our warehouse and half of which was our office. And we had a young guy helping us out. So what we'd do is, we suddenly found these two wholesalers who basically sent us these price lists that were pages and pages and pages long with every single product, most of the products that we wanted to sell on it. So we listed all of those products on our website. We didn't have anything in stock. Listed all this stuff on the website, and from both retailers. So we kind of covered most. And now, a brand like Clinique maybe has 200 SKUs. Now, we might not have had the very, very latest stuff because that hadn't yet made it onto the wholesale market, but we had most of what people wanted. So we listed it all up on the website over a period of a couple of weeks. And what we would do is, during the day, somebody would place an order for a product. Now, we didn't know anything about it. We didn't know what to order. We didn't know what to buy. We were completely clueless, apart from a bit of advice that Richard's wife had given us, or other girlfriends that we knew. So what we do, if somebody bought a product during the day, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we would phone up our supplier and say, right, we want to buy 2 of that product that person's bought, 2 of that product, and 2 of that product. Because we figured if one person's bought one of them, somebody else is going to buy the other one. It's obviously a popular-ish product. So, and it worked, funnily enough, because people buy the stuff that sells well is the stuff that people want. Clarins Beauty Flash Balm, Yves Saint Laurent Touche Eclat, all these kind of things. Sorry, guys, but and certain fragrances. People buy the popular stuff. So we basically, what we did is we would phone these guys up at 3 o'clock. We would order 2 Clarins Beauty Flash Balms, for instance, and in the early days, maybe 6 or 7 products would get sold a day at that point in time. So we would order 2 of everything, put one in a box, and then the next morning, at 9 o'clock in the morning, it would arrive in a box. Overnight delivery from Birmingham and Cardiff. We weren't making money. So we put one on the shelf and put the other one in a box, at the end of the day, take 3 or 4 boxes to the post office in the market at the time. And it just kind of spiraled from there. And obviously, over the course of the next couple of weeks, we would find that we didn't need to order often because they'd be on the shelf. So we would order like 3 of something, and then 4 of something, and 5 of something. And then basically we kind of built the business very, very quickly. We were incredibly cheap because we were buying it on the grey market. The prices were absolutely low. We were able to crucify our competition on Google AdWords, which was our biggest source of customer. And we built the business, and we became a massive pain in the arse to the beauty brands over the next 2 or 3 years. And we were constantly on the phone to them. In fact, my job was pretty much just trying to get the brands to deal with us directly for the next 7 or 8 years. We were constantly on the phone to them, and we got to the point where we were becoming a real nuisance to them because we were doing nothing illegal. We were selling stock that they had put onto the market themselves, but we were undercutting them seriously. We were making good money. We were getting growth. We were getting profile. We weren't massive. We were probably, by the end of year 3 or 4, we were turning over 6, 7, 8 million, something like that. So we were getting to the point where obviously their own distribution channels were getting annoyed with us because we were undercutting them on Google. We were getting traction, we were getting customers, we were getting profile, we were getting PR and all of these things. So we started to have some serious conversations with them around, look, ultimately we don't want to keep buying on the grey market because it's a real hassle. Arbitraging between 2 different suppliers. We need the full range of Clarins, yet this one will be cheaper on 10 products, this one will be cheaper on 20, this one will only have certain stock, and buying was just a nightmare of a job. So we spoke to all the big brands and said, look, we're not going to go away. What do we need to do to get direct supply from you? And we started to get into some serious conversations with them, and what they were saying was, at the end of the day, look, beauty has this thing called selective distribution. It's kind of unique to beauty, and it's one of the reasons that it's a good defensible retail business to still be in that they have selective distribution in Europe, which means you can only sell their products online, or indeed at all, the luxury brands, the likes of Chanel and Dior and Lancôme and all of these brands, and Tom Ford and Clinique and Estée Lauder, etc., if you have a physical store. Because you have trained consultants, you have expertise in-house, their brand is represented in the way that they want. So they said, well, look, if you want to sell our brands, you have to have a store. And those conversations started with the spa brands, the likes of Clarins and Talgo and Elemis. Again, sorry guys. So we ended up doing a deal with the Club Hotel and Spa just here, where we took over their spa, in exchange for some equity. It was all quite complicated, but anyway, we were able to say, look, we're running 2 spas, one in Basingstoke and one in Jersey, and that enabled us to get brands like Clarins, and we started to pick up some of the bigger brands. We then had similar conversations with the hair care brands, the luxury hair care brands like Kerastase and GHD and Redken. We're like, well, look, you're becoming enough of a pain in the arse. We'd rather deal with you directly, but you need hair salons. So we went out and we bought a hair salon in Longville at the time. We now have 4, I think. And that enabled us to get the hair brands. And then we had the same conversations with the luxury beauty brands, like Chanel, etc., about having the same thing came up. You guys need stores. So we said, right, we'll open a store in Covent Garden, whatever it takes. And they said, well, you kind of need an existing store with an existing relationship because we're closing doors, not opening new ones. Anyway, after a year or 2 of searching and trying to come up with ideas to make it work, we ended up buying Eau Caprice in Jersey and Guernsey and rebranded them as Feel Unique, and that gave us access to the brands. And at the time, as an example, this is kind of all important because it's about barriers to entry. Chanel had said to us, well, and Chanel are like the gods of the beauty industry. Trying to get Chanel was a nightmare. Most of the other brands kind of eventually came when we got, but they said, well, you need 2 stores. So that's hence eventually getting Eau Caprice, and after much negotiation. And then they said, well, you need to have had the account for a year before we'll let you sell online. So, okay, so we had the 2 stores. We went back to them a year later, sat down in front of him, and he said, I'm really sorry, but we've changed the rules. You have to have 3 stores now. Anyway, so then we went and bought a House of Fragrance in Kennervay. And we then had 3 stores, and eventually Chanel let us sell online. So going back to my original kind of point about being in the kitchen, if we'd had that third person in the room with us who said, look, this is great, guys, the Excel spreadsheet looks brilliant, I'm sure we can make money, the online marketing, you've got all those pieces, but if you want, for this to happen, you're going to have to, it's going to take 10 years to get Chanel. It's going to take 6 years to get Benefit. It's going to take 3 years to get Clarins. You're going to have to acquire stores, hair salons, and spas, and you're going to have to recruit like some very, very expensive people who know what they're talking about in beauty, which we also had to do. We'd have gone, you know what, it's never going to work. So we were kind of incredibly lucky in that we were just either really stupid or really naive. You obviously have to put yourself in a position to be lucky. I'm not going to give all the credit to luck, but it certainly was important. So that's kind of how the business evolved. Today we employ close to 300 people. The business turns over about 70-ish million pounds this year. We sold the majority of the company to private equity back in December 2012, and myself and Richard, the other co-founder, stepped away, brought in new CEO, COO, and while we still retain a small shareholding, we kind of, all the original 4 shareholders divested equally. I still sit on the board, Richard still sits on the board, but we're no longer operationally involved in the business. So I can only talk to you so much in terms of up until the point of December 2012 from an operational perspective. So, sorry, I need my notes now. So that's a bit of background. So moving on to the kind of the export story, if you like. Feeling it currently sells around 70-ish million pounds worth of beauty products a year. 35% of that is what you would term, I guess, export, in that it's outside of the UK. So 24.5 million pounds of Feel Unique's current business is export. In the very, very early days, it was actually probably closer to 50% of what we did was export. Now, bear in mind, I can only talk to you about export from an e-commerce perspective. You know, we're not a manufacturer. We didn't specifically set out to ship our products worldwide. A lot of it kind of fell into our lap. So I apologize if you're looking for a traditional export story, because this kind of isn't it. This is more about our, I almost said journey, but I didn't, about our story. So historically, we did about 50% of export, but at the moment it's about 35%, which is about 25-ish million pounds. From our perspective, we always set the company up with the idea of just selling beauty products into the UK. Jersey was never really an intended market for us. It was just our base. The opportunity to create a kind of net-a-porter would never have existed with just Jersey as our primary market. I wouldn't classify Jersey to UK sales as export on that basis, from our perspective. Others may. So for us, what happened was we knew about e-commerce and we knew about digital marketing, how to get customers, or how to at least get customers to walk through the door, how to get them to engage. We knew about conversion. We knew what we had to do to create a website that would enable people to buy from us. But what we found was that we built an English language website, obviously, and we were only marketing into the UK, and at that time there was a lot more activity on price comparison websites. It's not such a big thing anymore, but there used to be things like Kelku and Shopping.com and Chow, where you could list all of your products and they would appear on the Google feeds. And if your price was right, then it was a great channel to market. But the bulk of what we did online at that time was through affiliates. Does everyone know what affiliate marketing is? And Google paid search, so traditional Google AdWords sales. But what we noticed was very, very early on that we were starting to get a lot of international sales completely randomly. And at the time, a lot of it was coming from the Nordics, from Denmark and Norway specifically, with some sales from Sweden and Finland. Now, at the time, we were doing no marketing. But what we discovered when we started digging a little bit deep, no marketing in those territories specifically. What we discovered when we started to dig a little bit deeper, and this is the great thing about e-commerce, in that you have access to the most incredible data about where your customers have come from, where they've gone to next, what they've done while they were there, how they found you, massive amounts of data. So we were able to quite definitively pinpoint that we were starting to get an awful lot of traffic from some of these countries, and by using a tool at the time that we used a lot called Hitwise, which is a very expensive analytical tool, we could see where those customers are coming from. We were getting a lot of interest, we were getting a lot of mention from a couple of big bloggers in Norway and Denmark. Now, at the time, we were then able to reach out to those bloggers and encourage them to join our affiliate program, which is basically, in simple terms, we pay you a commission if you send people to our website. What was happening, though, was that was really driven by favorable currencies. So a lot of this story, this kind of export thing, is very, very opportunistic in the early stages. Favorable currencies, better pricing, and we had, being UK based, we had access to a much wider breadth of product than those people currently did in the Nordics, which were a few years behind us in terms of e-commerce. So women in the Nordics were able to get access to some cool British brands and some niche brands that they probably couldn't find elsewhere. Currency was in our favour, so putting the currency and the price together, we were incredibly cheap in those regions. But it was a very, very reactive thing, driven by completely randomly a couple of bloggers that had stumbled upon us somehow, and then word got out and we started to do really, really well. And then sales also started to pick up in countries like Australia, Russia, not so much the US, because the US was very well served in terms of beauty already. But what we found was that over the period of the first 7 or 8 months, almost half of our business was coming from outside of the UK, which was really, really unexpected to us. And also we were offering free worldwide delivery, which was a bonus, but we had these huge margins because we were buying the stuff so cheap. So what we realized then was that actually, do you know what? The UK is a great market, and if we can make it work on its own, that's great. We've got a whole business, but there was a massive opportunity for us outside of the UK as well. So we started to get a little bit cleverer about how we exported, if you like, and about how we addressed that international market. The first thing that we noticed in terms of converting those customers that were coming, what we were finding in the UK, we were getting maybe 7 or 8% of our traffic was converting, so they were buying, which it always kind of bothered me, because it always made me think, well, that's like 93% of the people walking through our door aren't buying a product. That sounds terrible, but the reality is actually for e-commerce, 7 or 8% is actually very, very high. It's a good benchmark. I still couldn't get my head around the fact that only 1 in 20 people were buying or thereabouts. It still bothers me to this day, as you can see. But it's actually quite good. And you have to bear in mind, a lot of people, like, the price might not be right. They might be coming for content. They might be coming for research. There's a whole bunch of reasons. But anyway, so 7 or 8% were buying from the UK. But internationally, it was probably about 0.5%, which is obviously a lot worse. So what we started to do was we started to play around with a few ideas initially and test different ways of converting the 99% of Europeans and rest of the world customers who weren't buying. We believed that a large part of that was language, obviously, although English is spoken, it is the biggest language in the world, is it? I think. I don't know. Is it Chinese? I don't know. Anyway, it's a lot of people speak English. We still thought, well, the chances are a lot of people are coming to the site because they may be searching for a product name, because those tend to be English for a lot of the big beauty brands worldwide, or French. Maybe they're searching the product name, coming to the site, but the whole English thing is just confusing them. And checking out in English, and also it's an English website, and this is the early days of the internet. People are worried about credit cards and stuff. So what we did was initially we used Google Translate to test the market, to test that theory. Google Translate actually is quite cool. So we enabled Google Translate on a bunch of territories that were doing quite well in terms of traffic and sales, but the conversion was very, very low. So we tried it initially in France and in Germany. Scandinavia wasn't such a big problem because their English is actually really good and the conversion rates were okay-ish. And what we found was with Google Translate, just by putting that on and having people have the opportunity to go, would you like to translate this page to English? Because at the time it wasn't automatic in Chrome or whatever browser it is that supports it now. We found the conversion rates went up massively. Not to UK levels, but they went from like 0.5% to 2%, which is quite substantial. And at that point, we were able to then look at certain markets and say, well, you know, we've seen a huge uplift in France. We've got decent traffic there. Same in Germany. Let's spend some money now and actually properly translate the site because it's worth doing that. So that's what we did. We found a company, I can't remember the name, who charged an absolute fortune to do site translations, massive amounts of money. So what we did is we translated the basics of the site. We translated all the shopping pages, the about pages, all of the kind of transactional areas, but not the product pages, because we had at this time probably 17 or 18,000 products. So translating those would have just cost us hundreds of thousands. So we did that, and again we found this massive jump in conversion rates and in transactions, which, doing the analysis, made us realize, well, looking at where people were dropping out, people were starting to drop out less at the shopping pages and at the transactional pages and at the basket pages, but we were still getting a high dropout on the product pages. So people were getting to the product pages, but obviously those who wanted more information or wanted to trust the site a bit better, or for whatever reason were getting to product pages and dropping out. And we kind of realized that we're losing so many at that point, it's probably worth investing in actually translating the whole site, which is what we ended up doing for France, French, German, Spanish, and I think at the time maybe Portuguese, because obviously we've got South America and various other things. So we kind of went through this way of developing a more structured approach to what had historically been capitalizing on random traffic that had been coming from, but by an awful lot of analysis and testing to make sure that it was going to work. We then discovered that in order to reach international customers online, there are a whole different bunch of payment systems out there around the world. You know, people in Germany don't necessarily use the same credit cards as us. People in Russia have this weird cash on delivery system. So we found that again, by further analysis, we could up our conversion rates by addressing the payment requirements of those customers around the world as well. So we ended up having to find payment solution providers. We used a company called Adyen, who have a real kind of worldwide portfolio of different options for different territories. And we discovered that by actually letting people pay in the way that they're used to in their territories, had another big effect on conversion rates. We then were doing pretty well internationally, and again, further kind of more structured approach to some of the practicalities of what we were doing. Aside from those, it was about marketing. Well, you know, at the moment, this is kind of all pretty random. You know, these people are coming to us anyway. All we're doing is kind of making it easier for them to buy and whatever. We started to look at, well, if we got more proactive in terms of reaching out to them, so actually marketing locally rather than just making it easier for them to buy when they randomly found us. And that meant starting to look at the moment, most of our marketing campaign was Google paid search. Fantastic mechanism for us at that point in time. So we got in touch with Google, and by this point we kind of Google have this very hands-off approach to you until you reach a certain level, and then they're all over you. And we kind of just about reached the all over you status. So we went to see them in Dublin and said, look, you know, we've got this we think a big opportunity in Europe. You know, we're doing really well in Europe and Russia and actually Australia as well at the time, but we've got no localized marketing campaigns. So they helped us kind of formulate a whole batch of localized Google paid search ads. So basically the search campaigns that we're running in the UK, we mirrored across Europe in local languages. And again, what we saw was not necessarily a big spike in conversion, but a massive spike in traffic. Because people in France are still going to use google.fr and they're still going to search in French, and we were able to start to target them more specifically. So we'd fixed our languages, we'd fixed our payment systems, and we'd started to market more effectively in some of those territories. And then we did the same with the shopping sites at the time. We started to approach the Quelcu.France and et cetera, and started to place our products on some of those localized price comparison sites. And then the affiliate programs. So there are a couple of big affiliate players in Europe, Affiliate Window and WebGains. These are the guys that we use to kind of generate our affiliate traffic. We found that in the Nordics, there's actually a whole different affiliate network. So we started to find affiliate networks that had better exposure in certain territories. And again, that helped us to increase our international sales. And then ultimately we got to the point where we started to do really, really well internationally, and we had to, and as the world evolved over the last 4 or 5 years especially, we found that we were missing an opportunity. All of our social media expertise was in the UK. And we found that where we'd started to get a bit clever and look at outside of the UK in terms of social media, we were having some great success. But doing it from the UK was very, very difficult. And doing it with a UK mindset in America or in Australia or in Russia is very, very different as well, because we just don't have our ear to the ground. We don't know what's happening on a local level. We can't react. So we ended up employing localized social media experts. A couple of them were actually in London, but we had a German girl in London who had only recently moved over. We appointed a PR company in Australia who managed our social media there. And again, we found that the return on investment there was huge, because fairly small cost. The ability to ramp up our exposure in certain territories was huge. And then in certain countries where we were doing particularly well and we knew that the market was strong, we ended up, for instance, in France, we recently bought 4 shops and we put a whole French team in. We have an office in somewhere in Paris, can't remember where, near the Louvre. So we have about 16 people. Some mice. Yeah, we have about 16 people in France now. We have 4 stores in Paris. We have a localized team. We have a whole kind of mini Feel Unique, if you like, because the opportunity there is so big. Funnily enough, underexposed in terms of e-commerce in France. They're still very, very much behind. In China is now, over the last 24 months, has gone from being about 6% of our business to being about 20% in the last couple of months. It's been an explosion over there. Employing Chinese expertise in the UK is pretty much a non-starter. They operate on this whole different spectrum over there. They don't use Google in the way that we do. They don't use Twitter in the way that we do. They have their own platforms. Don't ask me for the names. So we ended up doing a partnership in China with some introductions from Jersey Business, which has just been one of the most successful things at Jersey's. Locate Jersey. Yes, Locate Jersey. Take it, because I owe this man a lot more, actually. We were introduced to I don't know what you described them as, marketing agency, a kind of e-commerce marketing business in China. And basically what they've done is they've mirrored Feel Unique in China. We kind of outsourced a whole version of our website to them. But what they've done is they've had to, although it is Feel Unique, they've had to really redefine the way the site looks and the way it's marketed, because the Chinese have a very, very different approach to e-commerce than we do, and we just would never have had that expertise. We could have spent a fortune in it, experimenting and trying Western way. It just wouldn't. We probably would have got there eventually, but this has been probably one of the most successful things that we've ever done in terms of international and in terms of export. And 20% of 80 million is a decent chunk of money, I think, over the next. It's 20% in the last 8 weeks, so it won't be 20 million this year, but it'll accelerate towards that quite rapidly on an ongoing basis. So been incredibly successful, but again, it's every single market that we operate in, we've had to have a very, very different approach to, because either they are just so out there in terms of, say, China, which requires a whole different bunch of expertise to be able to manage it effectively, or in a country like France, we've had to open our own stores because, again, while we have a much more, it's much easier for us to operate in a Western territory. It still required a lot more localized. The French are a very patriotic, if you like, bunch, and they like things to be French. And it's only since we've done that we started to see really decent conversion rates. Where somewhere like the Scandics, it can be a very light touch approach, because their English is great. Once you've gained their trust, the price is good, so we can kind of manage that remotely fairly well with a fairly light touch. And then a country like Australia, it's a great opportunity, but it's a hell of a long way. So a bit of localized PR kind of worked really well. So we've had to kind of adapt and change and find our way in different territories. But it has been. I'd like to think it was a more scientific approach to understanding those markets, but it's been fairly reactive and opportunistic. Having said all that, we did win an export award, so. That was the one I didn't expect to win as well at the time. I was gobsmacked. So we must have done something right at the Enterprise Awards. So that's kind of potted history of Feel Unique and our approach to export, the things that worked for us. Interesting, useful. Any questions? How did I do? That was.
Aaron, we've got a great success story. It's brilliant. Jersey business can go like you've done. There's other great products and services in Jersey which many people believe should be getting out there. What's your sort of one best bit of advice to the business? How do they take that step? How do they get to take that step?
I think from our perspective, the hardest step is always like the first one, the first foot out the door. That's the toughest thing, to actually go, do you know what? We believe in this. It's a great idea. Taking that first step is obviously the toughest thing to do. We were kind of lucky in that we were both in a position where we could take that risk. We didn't have loads and loads of money at the time, but if it hadn't worked, it wouldn't have been game over. So I really feel, I really feel for people looking to set up new businesses that do have kids or mortgages and huge commitments, because it's a massive thing to do. Do you know what? I could answer that question in like 1,000 different ways, but I think the most important thing is that if someone like us can make this thing work, there's a lot more smarter people than we are out there. So it can't be that difficult if we did it, and we did it with a huge amount of naivety. And there's been some amazing success stories out of Jersey, and some of them are actually quite quiet and under the radar, in all sorts of industries. I mean, play was just still mind-blowing. Those guys were turning over close to 600 million at one point out of Jersey. It's a phenomenal story. I would just say just do it. Just go for it. There's a great amount of resource as well available here. We got some good advice and good help along the way. There's access to funding now, which just didn't exist when we started. The idea in my kind of current role, where I'm talking to entrepreneurs who are looking for investment, and I spend a lot of time in London and talking to people with an idea who value their business at 2 million quid and have done nothing yet, and yet they will raise the money and they will raise it at 2 million quid. That didn't exist when we launched. We kind of set out with this kind of what is now a crazy notion that if this thing doesn't make money by a certain point, it's not a company, it's not a business. The whole point of a business, to my mind, even now, and what I struggle with, is that you're there to make money. So the idea that we could just keep raising money at stupid valuations to fund a loss-making venture until the point that maybe one day in the future we can get sensible and come up with some kind of cohesive plan that this thing's actually going to make money, it's kind of odd. But that's the way the world almost is at the moment. And if you want to play in that game, there's a real opportunity to get out and raise money. People are throwing money at tech businesses and at startups at the moment.
Sound like a bubble to you?
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, but at the moment, yeah, no, it does. It's a very good question. It is a bubble. I believe it is a bubble. It's just.
Are we sort of like where we were in 2000, 2001? The whole .com thing.
I think we are, but in a different way. Even at that point, it wasn't that easy to raise money. It was more that money was going into businesses. But the startup scene now, and it's great, don't get me wrong, I think it's fantastic that there is this access to funding. But I worry about the whole kind of valuations bubble, if you like.
I'll ask one question about, because obviously you're an online retailer. Is the market just saturated though with things now? You obviously started many years ago and you had an opportunity. Hasn't everything been done on the retail side?
Nah. Retail. Is anyone here in retail? What is it you sell?
Women's clothes.
Okay, is it your own clothes?
No, it's
Okay. Is it your business? Okay. A diplomatic answer then. If I was in retail, the one thing that worries me most is Amazon more than anything. Beauty's slightly different because it's defensible in this selective distribution, and fashion is to an extent as well. Amazon can't sell Chanel. They can't sell Dior. If you buy Chanel and Dior on Amazon, you're not buying it from an authorized retailer, you're buying it from some grey market supplier who now I can say are pirates, and you should stay the hell away from them because you don't know what you're buying. It could be old stock, it could be fake, it could be anything. Fashion as well to an extent, because there is controlled distribution. But if I was in any other retail business, I worry about Amazon. I would worry about Amazon because they are just so good at what they do. So retail, I think if you've got your own product or your own brand, or you have some kind of defensible position, I think people are always going to buy stuff. And the reality is, I like to hope that they will buy more and more and more of it online. I also do feel, though, that there is a much bigger move towards a more omni-channel experience. Feel are opening stores left, right, and centre, not closing them. Amazon now have opened a supermarket in Seattle. They have opened bookstores in the US. They're going back to basics because they believe in that omni-channel thing. But the reality is, online isn't going away. People are always going to buy stuff. So I think there's still opportunity.
The Amazon supermarket hasn't got any checkout people, either.
No, that's genius. You literally walk in, take it off the shelf, and walk out. It's amazing. But you think, well, why not? The tech is there.
Well, the Co-op in Jersey have done it to a little extent.
That's shoplifting. You can't.
Not
Yeah.
It's going from one extreme to the
Yeah. So yeah, no, that's amazing. That is. At the moment, I think it's only for employees, isn't it? Until next March or something. But you think, well, why not? The tech is there. I don't know. I think it's amazing.
The delivery systems as well, and that would make a huge difference. People won't even need to go to the store.
You wouldn't fancy putting your store onto Amazon?
We did. We did. I'll come back to you in a second. We did. When Feel Unique, we launched in 2005. I think about 2007 to about 2009, we listed all our products on Amazon. Because we weren't supplying, we weren't getting direct supply from the manufacturers, so we could. But what we found was that a lot of the niche brands and the brands that started to sell really well, that Amazon didn't sell themselves, suddenly they would be approaching. So we thought, well, we're basically giving Amazon a learning experience here by finding these niche brands, doing really well on them. Suddenly our sales drop off, Amazon are listing it themselves, and they're undercutting us by 5p. We thought, so basically what we're doing is we're building Amazon's brand, and we're giving them access to a lot of data. And at the end of the day, we want to be the Amazon of beauty. We don't want Amazon to be the Amazon of beauty. And we were probably at that point, we were probably doing about 30,000, 40,000 pounds a month with them, which for us, that was quite a lot of money. So for that reason, we pulled off of it. But also we knew that once the brand started to supply us directly, they wouldn't let us list on Amazon anyway. So yeah, we pulled off it. If I had my own product, I would list it on Amazon.
What's the valuation of your business as a multiple? How do you value businesses in your industry? Do you value on multiples, or do you value on...
Very often we don't get the opportunity to value them because the founders have valued them, and it's kind of, well, that's what it is if you want to invest in it. And you know what, often if a business that we're investing in is valued at 1 million or 3 million, it's kind of binary. It doesn't really matter. It's either going to fail or it's going to succeed. Pretty much. And with a lot of startups and early stage tech businesses, there's a high chance of failure. So whether it's valued at 1 million now or 3 million or 500,000 or 3 million doesn't really matter. Because if it succeeds and it's going to be worth 5 million or 10 million or 20 million, that's the important thing. Because one now, 3 now, it's black and white. It fails or it succeeds. What's more important is the idea going to work? Can the founders execute on it? The valuation, we often we'll push back, but if somebody's gone in at that value already, there's not really a lot you can do about it. You kind of have to suck it up.
What made you decide to sell out?
Money.
And had anybody come in previously?
Yeah, we had lots of approaches. We started getting approached. We sold it in 2012. We were getting approaches from about 2009. We never intended to sell it. We never intended to raise money. We never raised money, in fact, throughout the whole thing. It was always a profitable business. We set the business up with this vision of creating the ASOS of beauty, or the Net-a-Porter of beauty. And that every decision that we made was, is that going to help us become the ASOS of beauty? Is that, we were incredibly focused, and the whole company had that same like razor point focus, and that's what we were going to achieve. And we were well on our way to doing it, but we realized kind of in about when we started getting a lot of approaches, while we're not looking to sell or raise money or do anything, we can't be naive enough to think that although we're kind of at the front of the pack, somebody could come from behind, or ASOS could become the ASOS of beauty, or Boots could get their act together online, or Sephora could move into the UK. So we kind of thought, well, if we don't capitalize on this opportunity soon and get through that window of opportunity, somebody could beat us to it. So we thought, well, we're getting all these approaches. Maybe we should listen to some of these people, because if maybe with a cash injection or with the right partner, they could get us there quicker. We can protect our longer term investment. And we might end up doing better as a result of it. So we started to have some conversations we had a lot of trade interest from people like LVMH, from L'Oreal, Hearst magazines. We had a whole bunch of people that wanted to talk to us about investing or buying the business. And we ended up doing a deal with private equity because it gave us the opportunity to retain a stake. So we didn't want to sell out and watch somebody else create the ASOS of beauty. And it gave us a bit more optionality. The business could still IPO. We could buy it back. It could get a trade sale further down the line at a higher multiple. And also, so there's that reason. There was kind of like, the fear of it all going wrong and having something that's worth X that's suddenly worth B because somebody's come and eating our lunch. And the other thing was, do you know what? Richard and myself, we're entrepreneurs, and that's the fun. The fun of it was the first 5 years where it's just like crazy, and you can make decisions, and the next day they're implemented. When you start to get to 100 people plus, it takes a longer time to implement decisions, and you lose that, not power, but you lose that ability to execute quickly, because process comes into play and HR comes into play and a whole bunch of other stuff. So the business needed to grow up. It needed to become more corporate, more structured, more accountable, because we were getting, by the time we exited, it was 200 people. So the business needed to grow up, and we were, and you know what? It's not as much fun employing 200 people as it is employing 20, because it's just, it may be for some people, but it's not for me. So we were kind of, done it for 10 years now, or 9 years at the time. Let someone else have that headache.
Any markets other than China that were unexpectedly difficult to crack?
US.
Have you cracked the US?
No. Although not unexpectedly, the US is so far ahead of us in terms of beauty retail. So yeah.
Is it particularly beauty in the US, or is it just the US market itself?
I think the US market itself, but I can only speak for beauty. There's a lot of beauty retailers out there, some really big ones, Sephora. It's more advanced in terms of, there's a lot more retailers that went on earlier. Amazon, from our perspective, Sephora, Ulta, in Walgreens to an extent. They are, if you're looking at fashion, there's loads of fashion retailers in the US. I think there's just more opportunity for us. There's lower hanging fruit. I'm sure we could do really well in the US if we put our minds to it.
Is it also in the US a slightly cultural thing as well? I know they speak English, but it's not quite the same English. And is that an element of the US market as well, or is it?
I think there are certain brands do quite well in the US. I think Not on the High Street does quite well in the US because it's kind of quirky English stuff.
Yeah.
So they've got an appetite for that. But we're selling stuff that's readily available in the US. Sorry.
In your sort of early days, to what extent was it important that you and Richard had very complementary skills?
It's critical. Richard is a great organizer. He's administratively very strong. He's financially a lot more acute than I am. He's quiet. He is, though. He is. He's completely different. He could never sit up here and do this. He would freak out. He would have a panic attack and run a mile. So while I was CEO and he was COO, we were kind of really joint managing directors, if you like. It was critical. We often say that if it wasn't for him, the business would have gone bust within a year, because I would have just gone gung-ho at everything. But if it wasn't for me, he never would have had the balls to get out of bed and actually do this. The self-belief that we could do it. Having said all that, for the first year, we sat in an office, literally, it was this big, it was split down the middle. Half was an office with 3 of us in it. That was the kind of warehouse of cupboards, and we just screamed at each other all day long because we had such massive differences of opinion. And then we moved to an office, we shared an office with My Memory, and we sat across from each other and argued constantly. He's one of my oldest friends, and it was the amount of times that I can remember storming off down the staircase going, right, that's it, I'm out, you can have my shares. It was ridiculous. And it wasn't until we got big enough to be able to get separate buildings that we got on. And we get on really, really well now. Don't get me wrong, he looks after my kids and he's a great friend. But working together with a partnership can be really, really hard. But in our case, I think without the other one, the company would never have stood a chance. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, I've been there. I know all about it. But it's amazing how often, you know, you hear people with, you know, good ideas and a lot of drive, but the early team winds up being, it wouldn't have happened unless you had that you know, synergy between.
Yeah, I know quite a few businesses that I've been exposed to directly in e-commerce, most of which were a partnership. Play.com, Money Supermarket, lastminute.com. These are all businesses that I know personally from the founders, all of which were a partnership, and probably many others as well if I really put my mind to it. I can't think of too many successful, you know, really super successful businesses where it was one guy that took it all the way. Even Microsoft, Apple, Facebook.
What do you mean by that, 2 people?
2 people or more, yeah. Mm.
From the story that you've told us, it's quite clear that being on Jersey hasn't stopped your success. And a lot of your success, it seems to me, has been driven by the way that you've developed the site and marketed it, but the logistics of actually being in Jersey hasn't stopped you. And I think lots of people in Jersey don't think about exporting because they're on an island and they think it's really difficult to export from here. But the message I'm getting from your story is that it's not a problem, or rather it's a problem that can be overcome if it becomes a problem.
Yeah, it worked to a point. Obviously, we don't export anything from Jersey now. We still employ maybe 60, 70 people in Jersey, but that's dropped substantially because obviously all of our logistics were in St. Peter's and we've had to move that to Northampton. And that's really driven not so much by economics, but more by customer expectation now. People want same-day delivery in certain places, like in London and Birmingham, Manchester, which we couldn't have done from Jersey. They want at least the next day delivery, and obviously from our perspective, boats, fog, there's a point of failure, and at Christmas that could cost us days and literally millions. If I was starting an e-commerce business now, a retail business, if we were starting Feel Unique today and being diplomatic, Jersey's not a barrier to that, but I wouldn't have put the logistics here today because of customer expectation more than anything. And also warehousing costs actually are quite high in Jersey. I'd still start Feel Unique here, but we would have taken logistics away day one.
Was LBCR, was that kind of you thinking game over for your company?
No. No, we were slightly different from Play.com in that LVCR was £18 originally, and I think it dropped to about 15. Most of our products were either over £15, so we were paying VAT anyway, or they were perfumes, which were exempt and still are. So we paid VAT on perfumes anyway. Having said that, we did a lot of stuff that was under £15 at the end, so it hit us. LVCR was kind of a bonus. We would have made money without it, albeit less money. We still would have started the business without LVCR. For us, the benefit of LVCR was that we'd kind of had set an example that there's a business opportunity here. But we happened to pick the one industry where it didn't really affect us too much. But it still hurt. We were making less money after it than we were before, but not enough to need to move to Switzerland or whatever.
On your move into China, and I appreciate locate Jersey's part in this. The other sort
This wasn't a setup, by the way.
No. When I think about how Jersey dairy has developed into China, as I understand it, that originally came about with Bob Jones and the Black Bag going there with
There's a feasibility study done first,
yeah.
which we funded, but Bob has taken it forward to where it is now.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can you just sort of contrast the
Perhaps I should-
why they
Yeah.
as opposed
Somewhere like China, you can't just go in as a lazy person and expect it to work. 'Cause a year later, you'll still be talking to the same person and we've got nowhere. So in terms of Bob going through, we use China Britain Business Council, and they still work very closely with them. In terms of Feel Unique, our lady in Beijing brought someone over to Jersey who we took to see you first thing.
I was very cynical at the time, I must admit. I thought this never, crazy idea.
6 o'clock that evening.
Yeah.
Having had the meeting with this chap who had an idea and a product, which you saw first thing in the morning, you asked for another meeting that evening. It was. So somewhere like China, you can't go into China without having an agent or someone working there for you to make it happen. That's just the nature of the country.
I was kind of intrigued though with the difference between the two sort of channels is
Probably not that different in reality. I think the fact is, both needed that local presence and that local expertise to make it work.
Out there, same sort of-
Yeah, because I'm involved in a Jersey dairy business actually, the ice cream, Minioti ice cream, and thanks. And they're able to capitalise on that same agreement and actually doing quite well there now, or will do quite well.
Any other questions? Aaron, thank you so
That wasn't too
much.
painful.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.